Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We are so excited to have all of you join us. This is a really important webinar because it's going to talk about and hopefully reduce some of the mystery of what it means to get a federal position. And part of why NMAC has been pushing that so much is that we believe that in order to end the epidemic, there has to be representation of people from the communities hardest hit by HIV within health departments, community-based organizations, and federal agencies. And so part of what we wanted to do, and part of what HRSA was so gracious to do with us, is kind of remove some of the mystery of what it means to be able to get a federal job. And I will tell you, I have been in Washington many years, and I did not know some of the things that I think you're going to learn today. I kind of ambushed Dr. Cheever yesterday at her meeting and talked about hiring people living with HIV, and she shared some data that I had never heard before. And so I want you to pay real close attention, particularly to the people living with HIV who are on this, because there are certain things that you need to be aware of. But with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Cheever to welcome us to the panel and to talk about today's webinar. So thank you, Dr. Cheever. You're muted.
I know. Let me start by unmuting. I'm just making everyone feel comfortable with the lack of technology. So first, I just really want to thank Paul for inviting us to be here today. It was a great idea. We in HAB, I think, really pride ourselves of having a lot of people from the community working in the HIV/AIDS Bureau. And we've definitely, I think, seen a fall off of that in the last few years that has been of concern to us. So this is a great opportunity. If we're really going to grow the leaders in the federal workforce from community, we need to be hiring more people from community at all different levels, because a lot of people in federal government grow into their positions over several years. So if we want to have that next group of leaders coming up, we need to be having more and more people hired into the ranks. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. I want to thank the people within HRSA, within the greater HR realm, who are going to be really doing all the heavy lifting today. And with that, I want to introduce Christopher Parker, who is a talent management specialist here in HRSA. I'll turn it over to you, Christopher.
Thank you, Dr. Cheever. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking to you all about how to develop a federal resume and how to apply for federal jobs. Next slide, please. And next slide. There we are. That's today's agenda. Next slide, please. Thank you. Creating a federal resume that brings your qualifications to life and shows that you're a perfect fit for a job can be a challenge. I think all of you know that. This slide right here, slide number 6, is a brief overview of how to create a federal resume. There's a lot of mystique behind that. You can create a federal resume 2 ways. You can build a resume within USA Jobs using the resume builder, and you can also upload a resume that you've already developed within USA Jobs and have it formatted to be like a federal resume. And it will basically also work that way. Using the USA Jobs Resume Builder, you can create a document in the standard federal format. It makes searching and evaluating your resume so much easier for federal HR specialists. A good resume targets the position that you're applying for. It demonstrates that you have the qualifications for the position being advertised, and it emphasizes your experience and your accomplishments. So it really emphasizes and highlights your experience and your accomplishments. Next slide, thank you. You'll notice the title of this slide is plural, your resumes. A lot of applicants don't know this. You can create up to 5 separate resumes in the USA Jobs Resume Builder. And it's a good idea to actually, if you're applying for multiple types of positions, to have 5 separate resumes in there. Each resume should target the specific position that you're applying for. Here on this slide, I've given you just some examples of what your resume should contain. Your resume should be 4 to 6 pages long. I've been in federal HR 29 years, and I've seen everything from resumes that are 1 to 2 pages long and resumes that are 50 pages long. But generally 4 to 6 pages should be able to capture your relevant experience within those confines. Also make sure that you have your resume listed in a chronological format with your most recent experience listed first. Also include specific information about the positions that you've held and the duration that you've held them. If you were full-time, if you were part-time, how long you held the position. All of that information is really, really important as you develop your resume. And only submit the required documentation for positions when you're developing your resume that's requested. Next slide, please. Slide number 8. Resume do's and don'ts. This one's actually important. Let's go over some of the do's first. Definitely proofread your resume. You'd be surprised as a federal HR specialist at how many resumes we see, my staff, we see on a daily basis that have typographical errors, misspellings. Definitely proofread your resume, because the resume that you submit is also going to be seen by the federal HR specialists and also the hiring managers. So you'll want to make sure that you do your due diligence on that end. Definitely edit your resume to reduce the fluff and make sure that every word counts. And definitely utilize data to quantify any points that you have to make. It definitely helps, I think, especially when hiring managers are looking at your resume. They're looking for specific specialized experience or specific experience that you've had, and you have data to support that. That really goes a long way. Some of the don'ts, I'll just go over a few of them. Definitely try not to include any personally identifiable information within your resume. That would be social security numbers, pictures, any relevant information about your height, your weight, your age. Please leave all of that information outside of your resume. I've seen resumes over the years with pictures, some very good ones, by the way. Yeah, definitely don't include any of that. Again, this is, try not to use acronyms. In the federal government, we utilize a lot of acronyms, so we're guilty of this sometimes. But not everyone knows what the specific acronyms stand for, and that's the HR specialist and the hiring managers. So try to spell things out in your resume. Also, try not to, and please don't, actually I'll say that, inflate any of your accomplishments or your skills. When we evaluate your resume, we go and we do a crosswalk of your experience with the Occupational Questionnaire. I'll be talking about that shortly. And so when we do that crosswalk, we have to make sure that everything aligns. And if it doesn't, then it usually comes out in the experience that you list within your resume. So those are just a few of the resume do's and don'ts. Next slide, please. Hopefully that gave you just some general information and about how to develop a federal resume and took away some of the mystique behind it. Again, you can create up to 5 separate resumes. So if you're applying for different positions, please make sure that you're developing separate resumes that are tailored for each of the positions that you're applying for. So this slide, let's talk about the USA Jobs website and how to apply for federal jobs. How many of you have actually been to the site? I'm sure by a show of hands, probably the majority of you. If you go to the website, which is www.usajobs.gov, this is the welcome screen that you will see. When you see this welcome screen, there are 2 big red radio buttons that say create a profile. So The first thing you'll want to do when you arrive at this page is create a profile. If you haven't created one, it's basically creating a USA Jobs account. It's a very, very simple step-by-step process where you'll complete your contact and citizenship information, relevant information to your specific background. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is slide 11, talks about navigating USA Jobs. It's been simplified over the years. USA Jobs is actually, it's the central posting location for the majority of jobs advertised in the federal government. And we'd like to think that it provides applicants with a streamlined application experience. We've talked about uploading a resume in the USA Jobs resume builder. Also how to create a profile. And then also there is, if you go back one slide, you're able to do that, thank you. You can also conduct a basic job search. And again, on this main page, you can see there's a folder, a blue folder. That's where you can upload your resumes and documents. You can make your resumes searchable. And then you can also apply for federal jobs. So all of that can be done basically from this welcome page. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Also on the main USA Jobs welcome page, this is at the bottom of that page. It's the USA Jobs hiring paths. And this slide shows the specific hiring paths for federal positions that are being advertised. If you click on one of the identified hiring paths, you'll be provided with a detailed description of eligibility requirements that may be needed for positions available in those specific hiring paths. So if you're a veteran and you want to find out more information about positions that are available to veterans, then you'd click on that tab. Once you click on that tab, it will go over eligibility requirements for that hiring path and what specific documents may be needed with your application package. And there's also a job search function within each of these hiring path tabs. So if you click on the Veterans tab, it will also basically give you a job search and do search for jobs that are available to veterans. The same with jobs that are open to the public, the tab above that. So it's a lot of really, really useful information just on the main USA Jobs webpage. Next slide, please. Applicant qualifications. This slide details how applicant qualifications and experience are determined when an HR specialist is evaluating your application. Minimum qualification standards are set by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. And they're basically set to help ensure that current and potential federal employees and potential employees are qualified for positions. For some jobs, you can qualify for positions based on experience and education. For some jobs, you can qualify just based on experience. And for some, you can qualify based solely on education. Experience is typically described in a qualification standard as either general or specialized, and I've defined each below in this slide. General experience is usually experience that's garnered at the grade level, specific grade level of the position that's being advertised. It's not a prerequisite to have this specific type of experience. A lot of general experience is administrative experience. So if you have worked as a clerk or a secretary and you're applying for a position that just requires general experience, that experience is transferable. Specialized experience is defined as experience related to the position that's being advertised. So if you are applying for a nursing position, as an example, and they're requesting, the announcement is requesting specialized experience, basically what that is saying is that you should have experience, at least 1 year of specialized experience working as a nurse. And within that specific field, if a specific field is being outlined within the vacancy announcement. Next slide, please. Education. This slide details basically that some positions have educational requirements. Other positions will accept education in lieu of experience, general and or specialized experience. And I put on this page, we always get questions along these lines. Education can substitute for grade equivalency. So for those of you that are familiar with the federal pay scale, if you have a bachelor's degree, you can qualify for, if a position's advertised at the GS5, you can qualify at that grade level just based on your bachelor's degree. If you have a master's degree and you're applying for a position and a master's degree is required, you can qualify for GS9. And if you have a PhD, you can qualify for a GS11 position. I didn't put the federal pay scale up here because I know we have a lot of attendees in different locations, and the federal pay scale varies from location to location. So I didn't want to confuse everybody with that. So, and superior academic achievement. Not a lot of applicants know about this. This information will actually be outlined in the qualification requirements section of the vacancy announcement. But superior academic achievement, if you're applying for a position that's a GS5 position and you have a bachelor's degree, and say your cumulative GPA was a 3.0 or above, then if you have the supporting documentation, i.e. transcripts, to be able to support that your GPA was a 3.0 or above, you can be considered for superior academic achievement and qualify at a higher grade level at a GS7. Next slide, please. Occupational questionnaire. This is slide 15. Basically, the occupational questionnaire, it's a tool created by the hiring manager and also by the human resources specialist to assess the applicant's experience relevant to the position being advertised. If you've applied for any federal positions over the course of the last 5 years, almost every federal job has an occupational questionnaire tied to it. I can tell you from an federal HR perspective, a lot of time and effort and work with our hiring managers goes into developing these questionnaires. Always make sure that you review the occupational questionnaire prior to applying for the position. A lot of people will basically complete the questionnaire as they're applying for a position, and that's just the first time they're reading through it. I can tell you as a practice, even for federal HR specialists, if we're ever applying for jobs, we always pull the job, read through the entire announcement, read through the occupational questionnaire to find out the specific questions that are being asked. And always ensure that your responses to the questionnaire match up with the experience and listed in your resume. Make sure that it's supported in your resume, because when a federal HR specialist goes to review your resume, we're going to take a look at your responses to the occupational questionnaire, and we're going to take a look at your resume, and we're basically going to do a crosswalk and make sure that your experience aligns with what you've indicated your experiences in the occupational questionnaire. I know there's a lot of people that will just go through it and say that they're experts at everything, but when you do that, I can tell you, we go through your application and we will do a crosswalk to say, okay, John Smith said that he's an expert in typing. So we will take a look at your experience to see, is John Smith an expert in typing? And if so, is there any data or any information within his application to support that? Again, your answers in the questionnaire don't replace your experience in your resume, and just be truthful with your self-assessment. Again, a lot of time and effort with the hiring manager and with the HR specialist goes into developing these questionnaires. So we they can target the specific knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed for the position being advertised. Next slide, please. Thank you. Applicant notification. Basically, applicant notification helps the federal HR specialist effectively communicate with applicants about where they stand in the hiring process. And it also provides transparency about the process. And I've provided a few bullets below. Once you've submitted an application, the agency that you've submitted the application to will notify the applicant and let you know that your application's received. This is an automatic system-generated notification. You should receive it via email. Generally, I can tell you, at least here at HRSA, this happens almost 100% of the time. Once applicants have been evaluated by the HR specialist, we go through and do that crosswalk with your experience in the questionnaire. We'll issue what's called a certificate of eligibles. If you're deemed highly qualified for a position and you end up on a certificate of eligibles, that certificate is issued to the hiring manager. And then once that's done, you'll receive a notification, an electronic notification, letting you know, yes, you were referred on the certificate, or no, you were not. And it's okay if you were not referred on a certificate, as a quick aside, to reach out to the point of contact that's listed on the vacancy announcement to ask why. It's always great when people do that, and we can give them additional information to help them the next time they apply for a position, so they can get to a point where they are referred on a certificate of eligibles and they're able to have their resume in front of a hiring manager. Once a hiring manager makes a hiring decision, all applicants that have applied for a position should receive a notification. And once a selection's made, the selectee will receive a final selection notification from HR. Next slide, please. Applicant status facts. From my 29 years in HR, I can tell you, definitely apply to positions as early as possible. I can't tell you how many times I've received calls for applicants that are applying to jobs at the last minute and they run into technical problems at 11:59 on a Friday night, and I'll receive an email Friday night or Saturday morning. Mr. Parker, I wasn't able to apply for this job. You know, the software, there was an issue with the software, there was an issue with the system. Definitely apply to a position as early as possible. Even when you do apply to positions as early as possible, you can go back and you can make edits to any of the information that you've submitted. So you have that flexibility. Definitely check the status of your application via your USA Jobs account. The notifications, if you aren't getting the email notifications, and check your junk mail sometimes. Sometimes they do go to junk mail. But definitely check the status of your application. You can do that through your USA Jobs account. Here at HRSA and within the Department of Health and Human Services, when we issue a certificate of eligibles, they remain open for 240 calendar days. A lot of applicants don't know that. This is something that we have initiated within the last couple of years, and it includes basically all announcements that we advertise within our agency and within the Department of Health and Human Services. The reason for this is it helps us streamline the recruitment process. If we advertise positions if we're advertising a position and then it has multiple positions available, and I'll give you an example, say a public health analyst. That's a mission critical occupation here at HRSA. Generally when we advertise for these positions, we advertise to fill multiple positions. So if we are filling, say we issue a certificate of eligibles, our certificate of eligibles of highly qualified candidates has 200 people on it, and we make 5 selections. that certificate will still stay open for other agencies to fill positions. So if there is an available opening at the National Institutes of Health or the Food and Drug Administration, and they have a like position, they have public health analyst positions, they will see that we have this certificate issued. They will reach out to our HR office and say, hey, Chris, can we borrow, we'd like to share that certificate. So even if you aren't selected, say for a position at HRSA, you can receive a call from someone, a hiring manager at another federal agency within the Department of Health and Human Services that's sharing our certificate to say, hey, we saw that you were on this certificate and we have an opening over at the National Institutes of Health or the Food and Drug Administration. And we would like you to come in for an interview. So this has really helped us streamline the recruitment process throughout the department. Also, hiring managers determine which applicants to interview and hire, not the HR office. And definitely within your resume, focus on demonstrating how you meet the specialized experience for the position. Again, 4 to 6 pages is, probably the right amount the right amount of length to have your resume. And with that, now Katie Sly-Griffin will talk to you all about special hiring authorities. Thank you for your time.
I have to be unmuted. Thank you, Chris. My name is Katie Sly-Griffin, and I'm the Accessibility Section Chief within the Office of Civil Rights, Diversity, and Inclusion at HRSA. And I'm going to start off by talking about special hiring authorities. But before I delve into those hiring authorities themselves, I'm going to take a minute to explain why the hiring authorities are so important. So on slide 19, special hiring authorities are important, critical really, because they support HRSA's commitment to diversity. HRSA is committed to hiring employees to represent the diversity of the population we serve. And we serve the entirety of the United States through programs which impact geographically isolated and economically or medically vulnerable persons. So there are 2 main hiring authorities that I'm going to talk to today. And just like Dr. Cheever said, it's critical that we be able to hire from the populations that we are impacting. So Schedule A, which is kind of a confusing name, Schedule A is what is used to increase the hiring of persons with disabilities, including persons who have HIV or AIDS. And second are hiring authorities for veterans and their family members. So on to the next slide, which is slide 20. So as I just mentioned, Schedule A is intended to support the hiring of individuals with disabilities. Schedule A creates visibility within the federal hiring process by making sure that qualified individuals with disabilities are able to have their resumes reviewed by hiring managers amongst the hundreds of applicants that vie for a federal position. Schedule A does not guarantee an applicant an interview nor a job, but by following the tips that Chris just provided, your resume is much more likely to be found qualified. And when you couple that with Schedule A, your resume is more likely to be viewed by a hiring manager. So that sounds great, right? But let's go back for a moment. The critical thing here is that the applicant has to be a qualified individual with a disability to use Schedule A. So Chris already discussed what makes someone qualified on a resume. And then we have regulations that define what it means to be a person with a disability for this hiring authority. And then what it means is that you have to have one of the following types of disability: an intellectual disability, a severe physical disability, or a psychiatric disability. HIV/AIDS falls into the severe physical disability. Next slide. So on slide 21, it's not enough though to just say you have one of those types of disabilities. For Schedule A, the federal government will require you to provide what's called proof of disability, or a letter that explains your eligibility. You can see here that there's a short list of individuals who can certify your disability in that letter: your doctor, a licensed medical provider, a licensed rehabilitation professional, or an agency that issues or provides disability benefits. Once you have that letter, you're ready to apply for positions using Schedule A. So you can go the USA Jobs route and upload your proof of disability into USA Jobs, select individuals with disabilities in your profile, and you're ready to apply to any position which interests you. But you're also able to take a second route, and that is to submit your resume to HRSA's resume repository by emailing your resume and your proof of disability to diversity@hrsa.gov. Again, that's diversity@hrsa.gov. If you choose that option, HRSA's Selective Placement Program Coordinator, that's a mouthful, will keep your resume on hand. Hiring managers request resumes of qualified applicants from the Selective Placement Program Coordinators for specific jobs. Schedule A allows the Selective Placement Program Coordinator to provide resumes so that hiring managers can expedite hiring if they find a great candidate. Next slide. This is slide 22. So now I'm going to turn my attention to veterans and their families. So the federal government has many paths for veterans to enter the federal workforce because the government is committed to retaining the talents of our nation's veterans. We're going to look briefly at hiring appointments and veterans' preference. Think of hiring appointments as affecting both the application process and the paperwork that brings the selected individual on board to the federal government, whereas veterans' preference only affects the application process. Next slide. This is slide 23. There are a number of documents which veterans need to submit with an application. The most important of them is the DD-214, which is the discharge from active duty. Now, if you're a veteran, you know what your DD-214 is. And if you are the family member of a veteran and you wish to use one of these hiring appointments, you need to find out what the DD-214 is. There are other documents as well. For example, the application for 10-point preference and a letter from the Veterans Administration or the VA. Those are documents that are used when electing to apply as a veteran who has a disability. Again, just like with Schedule A, once you have your documentation, you can upload it into USA Jobs, this time select veterans in your profile, and again, apply to any position that interests you. I also want to mention again that HRSA's Selective Placement Program Coordinator can accept resumes from veterans for managers to review as well. Next slide. This is slide 24. These are hiring authorities for veterans and military spouses. While I won't read the slide, what I want to stress here is that if you're going to apply using a veterans hiring authority, it's important to research in advance so you know which one best applies to your situation. Each one has specific requirements. For example, a campaign that someone fought in or how they retired. So be sure you understand the terms of each one. Next slide. This is slide 25. So as I mentioned earlier, veterans' preference is how, in the application process, veteran candidates become more visible to hiring managers. The way this happens is by the addition of points to an application after it is scored. Let me explain that for a minute. In the hiring process, resumes and qualifications are reviewed and ultimately given a numerical score. For veterans, additional points can be added to the application score. While this method does not guarantee of the veteran a job, it does bring the application to the front of the pile for hiring manager review. Next slide. This is slide 26. This shows the difference between the USA Jobs path and the HRSA resume repository path. In both cases, you must have fully prepared and submitted your documentation. You will only be considered for positions if you are qualified for those positions. And the result is that the hiring manager determines who they will interview. The biggest difference is that with HRSA's resume repository, hiring managers are seeking out resumes of qualified candidates. HRSA uses Schedule A and veterans authorities to provide those qualified candidates and expediting expediting hiring whenever possible. Next slide. So that wraps up our portion of today's presentation, and we're going to look forward to taking your questions shortly. But if we don't get to your question today, send an email to askhr@hrsa.gov. If you reference this training in the subject line, we will be able to respond to you. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ace, and we look forward to your questions in just a bit.
Great, thank you. It's an excellent presentation, and we really appreciate the time that you guys spent ensuring that that we're really focusing on people living with HIV and the communities that are disproportionately impacted. Now, we also wanted to have a robust conversation about how we're going to, what this looks like in the nonprofit space. As we know, people who are looking for jobs in the federal government are also looking for jobs in the nonprofit space, because what it really comes down to is how we're going to assure the mission and vision of the work that we do. So I will end here. Great. So one of the things I think is really important is that we're going to speak about people living with HIV and their experiences in the HIV workforce. And again, my name's Ace Robinson. I serve as the director of the Center in the Epidemics at NMAC, and we're really focused on how we're going to address the racial and ethnic disparities for people for HIV health outcomes. And part of those outcomes, of course, are your quality of life and your ability to live the life that you want to and participate in any form of service. So when it comes to doing work in the workforce, like applying to work at a position, at an organization that either you have attended as a patient, as a participant, as a client, or maybe you heard of, it can be very, very daunting. So one of the things that's very real is that, I don't know if I have the qualities or the qualifications that many of these organizations are looking for. So one of the things that I often encourage people to do is take some time and look at the mission and vision of those organizations. And when you're looking at what they're about and what they're trying to do, you can say whether or not you align with those values. And if you do align with those values, well, put yourself forward. Take that chance. Like, get out there and say, like, okay, I can contribute to making this happen. And you want to make sure that you're not going to sell yourself short, because those lived experiences are so needed, not just for outreach and all that, but all the way at the top to make sure that everyone who's making a decision understands that your experience is valued as we go forward. As the previous presenter was saying, if you're a person living with HIV, you can state that you have a disability without necessarily having to disclose your HIV status. It's just very important for HR, human resources directors to know that someone might have this disability, and for those organizations that are scoring, that disclosing that will actually help your ability to receive that final interview. So one of the things that always comes up in these conversations is, like, how do I know I'm applying to the right place? And I think many of us have heard mixed reviews on, like, oh, if you work here, this is going to be a great job. If you work there, this might be some problems for you. So do your homework. Take a few minutes, get on the website and look at their leadership structure. And, like, it's one of those things that we really push at NMAC and in a lot of our partner organizations is, does that leadership reflect who you are? And, like, not just demographics, like whether gender parity and making sure that we have racial and ethnicity that looks like the clients they serve. It's like you want to make sure that their leadership values of what you were able to glean is what you really want to go into. Because it's so important to say, like, you're going to be motivated and encouraged by the people who you're trying to partner with to move forward in these positions. And then also take some time to look at the fiscal stability. So if you go to guidestar.org, you can review these things called the Form 990s. And what a Form 990 will show you is the fiscal health of an organization. Now, it can honestly be a lot of information, a lot of paperwork, but the one thing that you can always look at is like, what is the revenue that that organization has put in? Are they in the red or in the black? Meaning, are they going into debt to do this work, or are they actually fiscally solvent, meaning that they can do this work and they still have some left over to do even more? And what you can do, you can look at, say, like the 2018 records and the 2017, the 2016. And when you're looking at that information, you'll see like, oh, is this organization growing or is it contracting? And it's really helpful to know that you don't want to go, like what's very important for many of us and who are doing this work is like, oh, is this job going to be sustainable? And that's going to really play into your life, because if you have a job, like say you're waiting tables or you're doing this work at this other nonprofit, you want to know where you're going. It's going to be good for you. And take the time to find out who that hiring manager is. You might not want to contact them directly until they reach out to you, but you might want to like reach out before a position comes up and say, oh, hey, I'm thinking about applying to this job, and take some time to see if you can get that informational interview so you can see what that person is all about, what their values are, and make sure that it aligns with you. Because as much as they're interviewing you for a position, you're also interviewing them for a position. So we spoke earlier about resumes and cover letters. So some suggestions that I will always push for individuals who are looking to come into the HIV workforce. Not everyone has had the same opportunities to really develop this aspect of their job hunting goals. So take some time when you're creating a resume. If you've never done one before, look at those resume writers. Look at the things that you can go on Google and like look for an example of a resume. Or you can find something that will maybe fill it out, and then you can tweak it or edit it later. But if you have any friends that are hiring managers, specifically in the HIV workforce or in the healthcare workforce, people who might be in a position that is that is similar to the type of position that you're applying to, meaning that this person would, if they were in that job and you're in that organization, they would be looking at your resume to see if it's a good fit. And ask that person to review your resume. But I know that can be hard. It's just like you're back in school. So they're like, tell them to edit it, exit out, give you suggestions, and really take some time to really hone in that resume. And when you're writing that cover letter, make sure you're telling your story. Who are you? Like, spend a whole paragraph telling people who you are. And what are you going to bring to that organization? How are you going to help them to achieve their mission and vision? And then finally, let them know you're clearly the best candidate. Tell them why. Be authentic, like as the first presenter said, don't inflate, but be authentic about who you are. You do not need to tone down to try to be modest. If you've done something, if you've been amazing at a particular position, you receive these types of certificates, let people know that, just to make sure that they're filling in those gaps between your resume and cover letter. And then also take some time when you're going to engage human resources. This is very important for individuals who are coming from communities that are disproportionately impacted by HIV. Like, look to make sure there's no EEOC findings, or if there are, what is that about? What is the diversity data that is available about the staff there? And then, like, what is their process for like job announcements and so on and so forth. And you might have that opportunity if hired to participate in like local hiring, or like you want to go to those job fairs and get your face out there, make sure people know who you are, because you are valuable. You have to get, like, if you don't have that opportunity, you didn't know somebody who's going to walk you over and say, hey, this is a great job, come meet this hiring manager. Make sure they get to see you. Go to those health fairs, go to those conferences and say, hey, I'm absolutely amazing. It's okay to carry your resume, and let them know that you are the person that they're looking for. And once hired, this is really important. Once hired, build some community. Make sure that your organization is serving you as much as you're serving them. So, like, what does that mean to have an inclusive workforce? Like, what is an affinity group? So maybe that might be a women's group, that might be LGBTQ plus group, it might be a transgender, gender non-conforming group. How are you going to be supported? And then do those things like, oh, how are we going to engage speakers who might be helpful to your own personal development? And we'll speak a little bit later about mentorship. Mentorship is great when you're doing this type of work, to make sure that someone's giving you real-time feedback on how you're doing, and making sure that you're getting that vocational development. And I can't speak enough. We'll speak about this in a minute, about what does self-investment look like? What does self-care look like? How are you taking care of your brain health? How are you making sure that if you are the community, from the community that you're serving, we always talk about what is secondary trauma syndrome. How are we going to make sure that like it's not triggering for you to be doing this work in the communities that you're serving? Do you have your therapists? Do you have your friends? Are you doing yoga? Are you eating well? These are very important conversations when we're doing this very important work to try to end the HIV epidemic in the US. And that goes back to those affinity groups, like prioritize that. Identify like what are your professional experiences, and like, so if you're Black, if you're Afro Latinx, a person of color, if you're a gender non-conforming person, you want to make sure that you're finding those groups either within your organization or maybe within other organizations that are health serving or are social justice minded. You want to make sure that you're taking time to find a way to support yourself through and through as we're doing this work. And when I talked about speaker engagement, it's like, we want to highlight diversity. It's not just enough to have us there, but how are we going to work within our organizations to make sure that that diversity is celebrated, it's not just a part of. And like, you might want to develop a speaker series, like, to say like, oh, this person's going to come in, they have this experience, and that's really motivating. It's really great for not just internal morale, but external, saying like, okay, how are we going to be a better part of this community? Maybe you'll have artistic performances, or like you go somewhere as a group. That's always great. Like in Washington, D.C., there's the Kennedy Center. There's all these opportunities for you to do things that are either free or nearly free, that you can get yourself out there and support community spaces, and also just attend networking events. It's like take your business card, take your phone with you. Make sure you're talking to people. Learn what other people are doing in the field. Learn how you can partner with individuals to really get this work done. Because none of us are going to be able to do this work in a vacuum. It's going to take all of us working together and holding hands as we cross that bridge. So when I was speaking about mentorship, mentors are helpful. You can have professional mentors, you can have life coaches, you can just have a best friend that you can bounce ideas off. And you want to identify that person who might have been in that position that you're in now, or someone who might have supervised someone who's been in that position that you're in now. And take that time to really just ask for real feedback. Be honest, share, kind of like going to therapy, and say like, okay, what do you think? Like, this was a challenge that I had, this was a success that I had. How do I enhance those successes and mitigate or reduce those challenges? And then offer to be a mentor. Because it's like there's so many people who are coming behind you. It's like each one teach one is what we often say. How are you going to take the opportunities you had to make sure that those doors are open and that you know how to move out of the way for the next person coming through? And just accept the fact that you have to be humble in these situations, because you don't know what you don't know. You might come into a position and be like perfectly ready to do 75% of it, but 25% of it, it might be a challenge, but you didn't know it was going to be a challenge upon walking in that door. And that's where your mentor can really help you guide through that situation. So if you see there's a flower, I call this watering. So like professional development is the key to not only your own personal success, but the organization's success. So what does that look like if you're going to get watered? Like, how are you going to grow from where you are on day one to where you're going to be 5 years later? And what does that professional development look like? Is it a training? Is it a speaking series? Is it going back to school? What does that look like? How are you going to fine tune your skills to improve like what you can do in your current job? And don't like just keep a straight line as to what you're currently doing. Look around and say, like, if I'm going to add more responsibilities to what I'm doing, how am I going to be prepared to do that? If that's what you want, unless you're in the job you want to be in for the rest of your life, take some time to look around and say, okay, how am I going to add a little bit more to what I can do right now, so that when that position comes available, like when it comes available and you're ready for that promotion, you're going to be the best internal candidate. Because the one thing they always say is like, if you're not being watered, you're bound to shrivel. How are you going to keep growing and growing and growing so that you and the organization that you support both benefit from all the work that you're doing internally to support the external? And finally, I just want to be sure that we are in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, speaking personally, speaking from friends, many of us have lost people in the past few months. We're changing how we're doing our work. We're having to pivot in ways that we didn't expect to pivot. And we have to understand that what we're doing is so important to the community, but you cannot do that work if you are not investing in yourself. You cannot do that work unless you're investing in yourself. So you have to be the person who's like relying on your friends. What does your support system look like? Do you have a therapist? Are you eating well? Are you drinking your water every day? How are you prioritizing your holistic health? And when you're prioritizing your holistic health, and you can bring everything of your authentic self to your life every day, including your job, it's not just going to benefit you, it's going to benefit the people that we serve. And as we're looking at a cultural shift, like, remember, you're not doing anything wrong. Like, we are doing our very best. And especially if we're trying to make sure that people living with HIV are centered in the solutions. When we're having that meaningful engagement of people living with HIV, what does that mean? That we have to make sure that we're as strong as possible to get to where we're going into the future. So now I want to stop here, and we'll go into a question and answer. Chip will be reading us some questions that have come, but I want to take a little moment and ask our friends at HRSA some questions. Oh.
One quick second. I forgot to teach people how to ask questions. And so let me just kind of quickly show everybody. On the right-hand side of the screen is a GoToWebinar control panel. In that GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a section that says questions. What I'd like you to do is, if you could type your question there, and if you can put your name and where you're from, and what will happen is, as they come up, people, Chip will read the questions, and then Ace will facilitate it among all of our HRSA colleagues and our federal colleagues. Are our other federal colleagues still on? We hope you can join us. Steve, Christopher and Catherine, great. Thank you so much. And by the by, thank you so much for making those presentations. You know, I think these are very hard times right now, and so many people are unemployed, and so many people have such great need. And part of why we wanted to do this was to really address the need that is out there, but also, in our efforts to end the epidemic, we know that people living with HIV are central, if not core, to the solution. And that we want to make sure that there are people living with HIV in community-based organizations, in health departments, and at federal offices. And so you would be doing us all a great favor if you could look at if there are jobs available for you to apply for. So with that said, what I'd like to make sure is, Chip, are you getting questions?
Yes, Paul, we have several right now.
Then I am going to turn this over to Ace. Thank you, Ace, for facilitating this, and thank you all for joining us.
Great, thanks, Paul. Yes, thank you again for all making yourselves available for this very important conversation. I'll just ask a couple questions, and then we'll go to Chip for some of the questions. My phone was blowing up while we were talking, so it's really great to know that there were quite a few people who are watching and ready to ask some questions. There's a question regarding education. How do individuals look at experience in lieu of education? How is that qualified, especially in these GS ratings? I think you spoke about bachelors and people who have a master's and PhD and specialized academic skills. So what are some of the experiences that might be able to substitute for education? I think that's
Yes, it's me. Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, I figured that I'd get some questions regarding that. Thank you for the question. basically, a lot of specialized experience can be utilized in lieu of education to qualify for positions. Again, it'll be outlined in the vacancy announcement. General experience generally does not qualify you for a lot of positions above a GS4 or GS5 grade level. But specialized experience will. And again, I go back, if you have a lot of our positions at HRSA are public health related. Public health analyst is a mission critical occupation within our organization. If you have experience within the Peace Corps, I use that as an example, and you can basically use that when we go through and when we do the crosswalk within your application, we can see, hey, this person has specific healthcare experience working in a health center or being a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and that will apply to qualify you for certain positions. So in lieu of education. So it honestly, it really varies. It really depends on your specific experience and what's being requested in that within that announcement. I hope I answered the question.
Christopher, can you hear me? Could you also comment? Yes. I've hired several people who didn't have a lot of formal education who came in at a GS5, for example, but because they were super talented and motivated, quickly kind of rose through the ranks. So they're sort of where you come in and what your opportunities are for advancement once you're in. Could you talk about that just a little bit? Because I think that occurs a lot of places, but certainly in the government.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cheever. And I can use myself as an example. I started off in the federal government as a GS4 right out of college. I had a history major, and my mom and dad were like, there's nothing you can do with that history major outside of being a teacher. And I was laughing. I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for a job in the federal government. And I was interested in human resources. I applied for a position. I qualified as a GS4 and got my foot in the door and worked my way up. There's a lot of success stories like that throughout our organization. We have a lot of senior leaders within HRSA that started off as either students, as pathway students, and that was one of those tabs that I showed you on the hiring paths, or started off in general administrative positions, and they've worked their way up the ladder to senior level positions. There's a whole lot of success stories within our organization and throughout the federal government. So yeah, it's just not the professional positions that we're targeting. We're filling a variety of positions, administrative, professional, throughout our organization. Yeah, we're looking for qualified people, and if you work hard, the sky's the limit.
And if I could add to that, I used to run a small nonprofit myself, just to sort of bridge what you were talking about, Ace, and what we're talking about here. And so I know that at HRSA, a lot of times our employees have actually come from the community, and they have actually worked in the community, whether it's for a health center or nonprofits, and they actually come to us directly from organizations that we've even funded. And so when you get your foot in the door, even at the community level, and you come in through that mechanism, it also can make a big difference. And so what I was talking about with things like Schedule A, if you're a person with a disability and you're using Schedule A, that's a great opportunity to come in, whether it's at a lower level GS level, whether it's as a student, or whether it's through a special hiring authority. You come in through the community and you get that experience. Maybe it is through that community organization. It's a great opportunity to really be able to leverage your skills, get them on that resume, get your foot in the door, and join the federal government through those means as well.
Thank you. Another question that was, I think, for you, Catherine. Maybe I missed it, so I wasn't able to answer it right away. do the widows of veterans, do they qualify? And then also, and then the person was gay identified if they were the widow of a veteran before equitable marriage began. How do they qualify if their partner passed away?
Right. So there definitely are routes that individuals who have lost a veteran can take to get into the federal government. There are hiring authorities specific to that. And I'm really going to encourage you to research that. There are websites, veterans.gov. Specifically, you need to look there, or sorry, not veterans.gov, Feds Hire Vets. Sorry about that. That's where you need to go. That's where you need to research. That's going to be your best point of contact. And you'll be able to find a lot of information there. FedsHireVets.gov.
Great, thank you. Chip, you said there were a few questions in the chat box?
Yeah, there are actually more than a few right now.
Great.
So you can hear me all right? We can start on those. So the first question looks like it's more of a procedural question of how can a person delete an old profile created on the USA Jobs website? Pretty asking, make sure there's not outdated information on there.
I'll take that. This is Chris. Yeah, the USA Jobs website, if you do have an old profile on there, there is a help function. If you click on that and type in delete old profile, there should be some instructions on how to do that. If you're running into problems with that, please reach out to us at askhr@hrsa.gov and we'll be able to assist you with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Are there any jobs where there is no degree needed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of positions within HRSA where there's not a degree needed to fill the position. Again, it varies from job to job. A lot of our administrative jobs, our secretaries, our human resource specialists, our administrative type positions don't have degree requirements. And again, it's specifically outlined in the vacancy announcement. So when you go through the vacancy announcements and read, that information will be under the qualifications section. So hopefully especially at HRSA, our vacancy announcements should only be 2 to 4 pages long. Generally right around 3. We've done it. I'd like to think we've done a great job at streamlining our vacancy announcements so it's not the abbreviated version of War and Peace that you guys have to go through.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question, is it a problem if a resume is fewer than 4 pages?
No, not at all. We're looking at the content. The content is actually the most important thing. So yeah, there's a lot of really good resumes that are 1 or 2 pages long. But again, we recommend, especially if you have the requisite experience, 4 to 6 pages. I was reviewing resumes. I'll give you an example. About a month ago, and a gentleman sent in a resume. It was 40 pages long. It literally took half the afternoon to go through. So yeah, a resume 1 or 2 pages. Again, we're just looking at the content. So as long as the content aligns with your responses to the occupational questionnaire, you're absolutely fine.
Judging by Dr. Cheever's facial expression, 2 pages is just fine.
Yeah, if you've got the information there, you need to, when we're looking at your resume, we're trying to, one, you have to make sure you show your qualifications for the job, because certain people apply and then I know they've applied and HR tells me they're not qualified. So you need to make sure you're aligning with the qualifications, because we don't get to see you unless HR says you qualify. For most hiring, there's also different processes, but for a lot of hiring. So that's important. But beyond that, if I'm reading it, I want to make sure that you're someone that looks like they can do the job and will be an interesting and good fit candidate. So that's really what I'm looking for. And so I don't need 7 pages. You can do it in 2 pages. You should definitely do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, we've had a couple of questions along these lines of how can they speak with someone after this webinar if they have additional questions?
Sure. Again, you can reach myself or Katie through the askhr@hrsa.gov. Through that contact information, if you reference this webinar in the title, those communications will go right to us, and we will definitely get back to you within 48 hours. So, yeah.
You said ask HR@HRSA.gov.
Correct. Yeah. Thanks, Ace.
Thank you. And if anyone needs my email address, is arobinson, AROBINSON @nmac.org.
The other thing I want to say before we do end is something that I think Christopher or Katie referenced, that often when we're hiring people within HAB, we're hiring them off of a general HRSA certification or general. So if there's a HRSA, if you're interested in being a project officer, working directly with recipients, grantees, you should apply to a variety of things that you see that come out across HRSA, because often there'll be a certification, there'll be an application that we'll be using for all of the different vacancies in the different areas. So if you start looking for HIV/AIDS Bureau specific things or Ryan White specific things, those might never come up, because we are doing our best to facilitate quick hiring in the federal government and good hiring. So we don't put out our own specific announcements often as part of a much more global, broad HRSA announcement. Sometimes we hire people for statisticians and things off of an announcement that the Maternal Child Health Bureau put out, for example. So if you're interested in coming to HRSA and to the HIV/AIDS Bureau, I would be applying widely to HRSA opportunities.
Great, thank you so much.
Next question. One of the facilitators would strongly encourage to apply to federal jobs as soon as possible. I graduate with a bachelor's in May 2021. How soon in advance do you suggest applying so I can have the prospect of being hired after graduation?
This is Chris. Honestly, there's a couple of different ways that you could go about that. Congratulations on your upcoming graduation, by the way. There are, if you are looking to continue your education, you can you can come into the government at our agency. You can apply for positions now via the Pathways program. It's again one of those hiring paths that was listed on the USA Jobs main page, www.usajobs.gov. And if you click on that, you'll see all of the different positions available there. We do hire a lot of Pathways students at HRSA. We have a lot of people seeking their graduate degrees, their undergraduate degrees. And it's, again, another great way to get your foot in the door within our organization, within HAB, and within the other institutes, the other offices and bureaus within HRSA. So if you'd like to wait and apply for positions once you have your degree, you can do that also. Generally, if you're going to be getting your degree right around May, you can start applying for positions right around then, but I would encourage you to apply for positions. Don't wait until then. Apply for positions now. If you see things that are available, apply. Please, please, please. Yeah.
Thank you. The same person keeps asking me the same question, so I better get it in so I don't get in trouble. So when it comes to gaps in resume, as we know, many people who are not afforded the same opportunities in life might have had some gaps in unemployment. Are they supposed to address those gaps and just say unemployed and looking for a job, or what is your best advice for individuals who have gaps?
I'll take that one. Honestly, it's okay to say unemployed. We see gaps all the time. Again, we're just qualifying applications as they come in. So I'm just looking at the content. I think if someone they have the relevant experience and their application, they make a certificate and their application's put forward, say, to Dr. Cheever, then they can articulate during an interview, if they're called in for an interview, specifically why they were unemployed, if they'd like to do that. That's probably a question asked during that time. But it's absolutely okay to put that on a resume. We see gaps in experience all the time, and it could be related to people taking time off to take care of their kids, people taking time off to go back to school. It's a variety of things, and it's absolutely okay.
COVID-19.
Yeah.
Real. Thank you. Chip?
Follow up from the attendee who's graduating in May. You mentioned that having a bachelor's degree is a GS5 level. Can the combination of degree and specialized experience boost that to a higher level?
Yeah. Again, the hiring manager generally drives that. So even if you have the superior academic achievement, actually, let me go back to that since they were specifically asking about qualifying at a higher grade level. If they are applying for a GS5 position and they have a cumulative GPA at 3.0 or above, they can qualify for a GS7 position based on superior academic achievement. And you'll just have to have official transcripts to be able to validate that. And that information, all of that will be listed in the vacancy announcement. But yes, you can qualify for a position higher than a GS5 after you graduate with a bachelor's degree. And again, there are a lot of people with bachelor's degrees that have a lot of relevant experience that qualifies them for higher graded positions. There are a lot of people that have a lot of experience working while they're going to school, and that relevant experience is qualifying for higher graded positions. So please don't just let education hold you back if you think, I have all of this relevant experience, but I'm not sure if I qualify or not. Please, please, please list it in your application along with your educational information. And you might be surprised. Yeah, we bring students in at higher grade levels a lot of the time.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Next question here. Does the federal government hire older people, say 60 and over?
Of course. Yeah, there are absolutely no age limitations. So again, when you submit your application, we can't tell how old you are. We can't tell what you look like. Again, please don't submit any pictures. No personally identifiable information. Absolutely. There is no age discrimination whatsoever.
Often a similar question I get from people regularly is, do we hire people that are pregnant? And we hire people that are pregnant and sometimes very pregnant regularly. So that's no one should consider waiting till after they deliver before they consider coming for a federal job if they're interested.
Thank you. That's super important. Thank you.
Next question. Do you review resumes manually or using an automated system?
Really good question. Doing this a long time. In the old days, definitely manually. Now it's a combination of both. The initial qualification determinations are done that's automated. The specific qualification determinations, the crosswalk, is done by an HR specialist. So the basic determinations, the one that's done automated, the system will go through and see if there's a citizenship requirement for the position. I think there's a radio button you have to click that says, are you a US citizen, yes or no? If you indicate no, you automatically get screened out if the position's just for citizens. So that's where the automatic screen out comes in. The majority of the rest of the qualification determination is done by a qualified HR specialist. And you have to understand, and I'll be frank, qualifications are subjective. The way that I see qualifications could differ from the way that Dr. Cheever or Katie or ACE sees qualification determination. I'd like to think at HRSA, our HR specialists are very well versed in their review of application determinations. I can tell you, if you get an application determination that you don't necessarily agree with, reach out to the servicing HR specialists and ask to speak with them and get more information as to, hey, I received notification that I didn't qualify for this position and I want to understand why. And I can tell you, at least at HRSA, the HR specialist will get back with you and walk you through why you weren't deemed highly qualified for a position and what you can do to improve your resume moving forward.
Yeah, I want to quadruple underline that. Even within a HAB, when people are applying for new positions or for promotions and they don't qualify, I encourage our recipients to do that, or our employees to do that. Really, for a lot of people, it might take more than one attempt to apply to the federal government because it is a bit of a process that we're trying to outline here. There's someone that I've just been able to hire. It was his third time applying because it was a complicated position with a lot of different requirements, and he never got them all in on time. So, so just know that it is a little bit of a process. And so if you don't succeed the first time, I don't want you to step away and say this is impossible. Reach out, figure out what happened, what has to happen differently, because it does work. And sometimes it does take more than one attempt. It even does for employees that are in the government as they're moving to new positions.
Yeah.
As a quick follow-up to that, like I know how I probably heard the question maybe differently. Is it helpful for individuals to have their resume and cover letter utilizing certain words, if it is from anything that goes through an automated system, to make sure that they are at least reviewed closely by the HR person?
I'm sorry, Ace, could you repeat that? Did you mean, is there,
should the person utilize, right, should the person utilize keywords in their resume and cover letter to ensure that they're being highlighted? I think like Dr. Cheever is saying that they needed, the person wasn't able to highlight all these things all at the same time. Is that helpful for the HR director to make sure individuals are looking at the job description closely and then utilizing that same language to ensure that the HR person is highlighting that individual?
I'd say sure, but it's not a requirement. Again, they won't be screened out if they're not specific, if there isn't specific language in the announcement. So again, it just comes down to the content. We're not really looking for specific buzzwords. If you're applying for a specific position and it's requiring specialist experience and a specific, a targeted, a targeted, what's the word I'm looking for? I just drew a blank, I apologize. And a targeted occupation, thank you. It's only one cup of coffee today, bear with me. If you're looking for, in a specific occupation, then we are looking for that specific experience. But in terms of buzzwords, things like that, you're not going to get screened out because you didn't add a specific buzzword within your application.
Thank you.
Sure.
We had one comment here. Please mention that it can take a few months to hear about positions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. We may ask this question about seniors. Are there any special considerations that seniors should take into account when they're applying? No. I can tell you as an HR specialist, I can't determine how old you are when your application comes across my desk. I see experience and I see education, and that's basically it. I don't see anything else outside of that. So, and to answer the other question, I can tell you right now, the application process probably is taking a little bit longer. We are receiving an inordinate amount of applications for all of the jobs we are posting. I'll give you an example. We recently posted a public health analyst position at different grade levels at the GS9, GS11, and GS12. And combined for that position, we received over 1,000 applications.
So it does take time to go through and do our due diligence in terms of ensuring that we're doing the correct qualifications determinations and that we're getting the right people in front of the hiring manager. So sometimes that will take a month, maybe a month and a half. We do our best to try to streamline that process, but sometimes it does take a while. And if you have questions about that, again, reach out to the HR specialist. They will be able to give you a timeline. If you haven't heard anything, you submitted an application, the job closed, say 2 weeks ago, reach out to the HR specialist and say, hey, is there a specific timeline that you will, that I should maybe hear about if I made a certificate or not for this position, and they'll be able to give you that information.
I think I have a question for Katie. So as it relates to Schedule A and disabilities, how can we ensure that people living with HIV, their health status will be kept confidential because they're sending their health status to, I think it was diversity at HRSA.gov. So how do you ensure confidentiality? Because I think many of our constituents have had poor experiences when their employers know their HIV status.
So Dr. Cheever and Chris know me well enough to know that I take confidentiality very seriously. And we are obligated under the Rehabilitation Act, which is equivalent to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we are obligated under that statute to maintain confidentiality at all turns. And the requirements for Schedule A have the same requirements. Confidentiality is required. The proof of disability letter, there are templates for that on OPM's website and through USA Jobs. You can find the templates there. It does not state what your disability is. It simply states that you have a qualifying disability. So once you have that letter, you're not disclosing what your disability is, simply that you have one. But even the fact that you have a disability is not something that we can tell someone. The most we can do is this very limited sharing, which is to say that this person is qualified for Schedule A or this person is a qualified veteran. That's a very limited form of sharing, and we can't go beyond that. So your personal information related to your disability will be held confidential. We cannot disclose it. And frankly, even if your information does come to me, I cannot disclose it. It must then stay with me. And frankly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write back to you and I'm going to say, hey, too much information, didn't need to know this. For future reference, go ahead, take this out. This is all you really needed to include here. So I'm going to provide that information and education to anyone who approaches me.
Thank you. And I think it's very important for individuals who might get hired. Can you speak to the how accommodations work for individuals who might have more doctor's appointments and they can't keep taking sick time and paid time off? So how does a reasonable accommodations work if you're a person living with HIV who has just more appointments?
Yep, so reasonable accommodations are available both to applicants and employees if you do in fact get a job. On the application side, if you need a reasonable accommodation, for example, a sign language interpreter to be with you during a job interview, you simply need to let us know ahead of time and we will work with you to make sure that you have the accommodation that you need. And for once you have been offered the job, if you let us know, we'll work with you and we will come up with a package of accommodations that works for you, your position, the agency. That's going to work for everybody in that circle to make sure that everybody's getting what they need. So whether that is a flexible schedule to be able to attend appointments, whether that's specific software or devices, maybe it is that you have some sort of back injury and you need a specialized chair. We'll work with you to make sure that those needs are taken care of, but we'll have those conversations on an individualized one-on-one basis. And again, it can happen for the application process or once you're an employee.
Thank you. And Chip, you said there's one more comment or question?
There are two more questions. And the first one I'm not sure you'd be able to answer, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Do you suggest going through the disability certification program to get hired with the VA?
So not sure if I'm going to answer this question correctly, but I'm going to take a stab at it. If you are a person who is a veteran who has a disability, then you need to speak with the VA directly about whether or not you have a qualifying disability, get the percentage ranking that the VA does, and they will then issue you a letter. And so the VA is your point of contact if you are a veteran who has a disability, or if you're a veteran who's getting services of any type, right? So it's the VA who you're going to talk to if you are a veteran. If you're not a veteran, you don't need to talk to the VA. But just come in, you can send us a question at askhr at HRSA.gov if I didn't answer your question, and I'll be able to provide you more information if I didn't quite get to what you were seeking.
Great, thank you. And our final question, Chip?
Sure, I just want to make sure, just quick, the email address is askhr@hrsa.gov.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just let me know, I'm sharing that in the chat now so everybody can see it and can have it there to copy for their use. So it's there in the chat for everyone. Final question. Typically, how long is the hiring process from time of submitting application to getting an offer and a start date?
Good question. Honestly, it varies. If we have a position where we only have 10 applicants, we can vet that pretty quickly. We can turn around and get a certificate to a hiring manager probably within a week. A lot of it lies with the hiring manager also. Hiring managers are busy. So some hiring managers have one round of interviews, some have 2 or 3 rounds of interviews. Some interviews are set up as panel interviews. So I think a lot of it, it's dependent upon the position that you're applying for. And the hiring manager, a lot of it's with them, how quickly they want the position filled. I can tell you recently, since the beginning of this year, and especially since the onset of COVID, we've been filling positions pretty rapidly, right, Dr. Cheever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is that first part. If 1,000 people apply for a job, it takes a lot longer. But within Habit Lease, once we get it, we try to be pretty expeditious. We usually do 2 rounds of interviews. We often start with a first round of a 15-minute interview to a broader series of people, and then a short, and then for a select group of people, a longer, like 45-minute interviews. That way we can get them done more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And one other thing I'll mention, since the onset of the pandemic, we're doing everything virtually. So I think it has freed up a lot of the hiring managers and a lot of the applicants as well. So in terms of time constraints. So logistically, it's making things a whole lot easier. People don't, if you're not physically located where our HRSA headquarters is in Rockville, Maryland, I know we had applicants that used to have to take the train, the metro down for interviews and go through security. Just getting through security and getting into our building some days takes an hour. So, now, we are able to bypass a lot of that and streamline, the entire process.
Okay, and we have no further questions in the chat
Thank you
box.
for taking your time.
So.
I just wanted to thank everyone for taking their time to share their thoughts and perspectives on how we can make sure that people living with HIV and from the communities disproportionately impacted by HIV can be a part of the workforce, from the federal government to health departments to CBOs. And I also want to thank HRSA. They're not just speaking into the air. They have invested in these exact conversations. HRSA has recently awarded NMAC to create a program called Elevate. And Elevate is really going to focus on how are we going to support people living with HIV to not just get into the HIV workforce, but to move into leadership and also within planning bodies. It's very important that we're having this conversation and bringing it to the streets. Then also with another HRSA awarded program, we're going to be looking at how we're going to address HIV-related stigma and associated discrimination that many people experience, because we need to eliminate that if we're really going to do the work to have a world where people are liberated from their health status when they're trying to contribute to society. So Dr. Cheever, did you have any final words?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for participating, for my colleagues at HRSA and for NMAC. I really feel like this was sort of a landmark opportunity for us, and I can see us doing more work like this in the future. So thank you so much for, I think it was Paul who mentioned that we should do this, or we got in a discussion we had, and it was a great idea. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone have a great afternoon, and please be good to yourselves while you're being good to each other.